I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I've stayed close friends with a guy I met back in college, let's call him Marlon, who's now 31. We met during our freshman year, graduated together, and even now we still meet up for lunch breaks since our offices are only a 5-minute walk apart. I work in a federal government position, while he's with an investment firm. Last October, I let Marlon move into my place after his girlfriend, Paige, 29, broke up with him and told him to get out. Paige is Jewish, openly bisexual, and runs her own tattoo shop. She's covered in stunning ink from head to toe, with long jet black hair, and she has a strong personality, someone who speaks her mind and knows how to stand her ground. For some background, Marlon grew up in a very traditional evangelical family in Mississippi. His parents moved to the Bay Area in 2020, supposedly to be closer to him, but honestly, it always seemed more like they came here to get him to take care of them. His mom lives on welfare, his dad's on Social Security, and his older brother Ryan, who's 35, doesn't work at all. Ryan lives entirely off their parents and Marlon. The three of them share a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, while Marlon had been living with Paige until the breakup and now, of course, with me. His family is downright toxic. They treat him with little to no respect, constantly nitpick his choices, and go out of their way to coddle Ryan while tearing Marlon down. They ridicule him, criticize him, and somehow still expect him to carry the financial load. He pays their rent, their grocery bills, their internet, their shopping expenses, basically everything, and still gets treated like an inconvenience. When he was dating Paige, they had an agreement not to meddle in each other's family drama unless it started to directly affect their relationship. Even so, Paige had made it clear that she didn't like the way Marlon's family treated him. She didn't press the issue, though, because of that agreement and because, at the time, his family's behavior hadn't directly spilled over into her own life. Still, she avoided them as much as she could, because their treatment of him disgusted her. Whenever she tried to defend him, Marlon would shut her down, telling her not to raise her voice to his parents. The few times Paige did interact with them, it went badly. Once, she ended up in an argument with his parents after his mom made snide comments about her tattoos and demanded she take down the Pride flag, Ukraine flag, and BLM banner from her tattoo parlor. They also hated the fact that she owned her own home, something she inherited from her grandfather, claiming it was emasculating for a woman to own property or a business separately from a man. Marlon even told me once that his parents wouldn't consider accepting Paige unless she completely removed all her tattoos, gave up her Jewish faith, and started living the exact same strict evangelical lifestyle they'd raised him and Ryan in. In other words, they wanted her to convert and become some sort of traditional wife. Instead of defending Paige, Marlon half-heartedly suggested she cover up her tattoos and take down the flags as a compromise to keep the peace. She refused outright, telling him that if he kept pushing it, she'd leave. The thing is, when Marlon's family isn't around, he's actually a great person, kind, intelligent, and incredibly supportive. Back in my freshman year, when I was going through a rough time, he was there for me without hesitation. But ever since his family moved here, it's like they drained the life out of him. Paige, me, and his other friends have all told him he'd be better off cutting ties, but he just won't do it. He's always convinced that if he tries a little harder, they'll change. They never do. Things got worse when his mom's spending habits and credit card debt started spiraling. On top of that, his parents used a lot of the money he gave them to travel across the country to attend campaign rallies during last year's presidential election. Eventually, he couldn't give them any more cash, and that's when they turned their attention to Paige. They began contacting her, demanding that since she was their son's girlfriend, she should help support them financially. Paige ignored them at first, but it all came to a head when Marlon's mom and Ryan physically showed up at her tattoo parlor, demanding money. They believed that whatever belonged to Paige automatically belonged to Marlon, and by their twisted logic, that meant it belonged to them too. Things escalated fast. Ryan jumped over the counter and started trying to force open the cash register. Paige was already on the phone with 911 when Marlon's mom punched her in the face and tried to grab the phone. The barber from across the street, a friend of Paige's, saw the chaos and rushed over with 2 customers to help. They managed to restrain Ryan while Paige finished her 911 call. Marlon's mom started screaming racist slurs at the barber and called Paige a Jewish crack slur. Police arrived, and both Ryan and Marlon's mom were arrested. Paige pressed charges, telling officers that Ryan had attempted to rob her and that his mother's punch had left her with a bleeding lip and a mild concussion. As for me and Paige, we're not close, more like acquaintances. We've met a couple of times at events with Marlon, follow each other on Facebook and Instagram, but that's it. After hearing Marlon's version of the breakup, I reached out to Paige just to get her side. We met at a tea house in Union Square, and she told me everything, filling in details Marlon left out. She explained that after the attack, she'd filed charges and a restraining order against his family. That's when Marlon begged her to drop it, claimed she'd made the whole thing up, and make peace even though there was security footage proving what happened. Paige said Marlon never once asked if she was okay or apologized for his family's actions. That was it for her. She ended the relationship on the spot, telling him that he'd consistently chosen his family over her and that she couldn't feel safe as long as they were in his life. I told her I was sorry for what happened and that it wasn't her fault. Before we parted, she squeezed my hand and gave me one last piece of advice. If I was going to have Marlon living with me, I should keep my distance from his family, no matter what. Before Paige left that day, she also warned me about something else. Marlon's mom apparently has this strange, almost obsessive fixation on having grandchildren. When I got back home, where Marlon was already living at the time, I lost my patience and confronted him. I told him point-blank that he owed Paige an apology for failing to have her back and that he needed to stop begging her to reconcile. It took him a couple of months, but he eventually did apologize. After that, I sat him down to talk about setting boundaries with his family. I knew he'd never go completely no contact, but I pointed out how ridiculous it was that he earned more money than I did and still struggled to support himself because almost his entire paycheck went toward covering 3 other adults' debts, rent, groceries, and even legal bills. I reminded him that his inability to stand up to them had already cost him not just a few friendships, but also a 3-year relationship with Paige. He seemed to understand, but actually enforcing those boundaries? That's still a problem. And yes, in case you're wondering, he's still paying their bills. For context, I live in my family's 4-bedroom home, the same one my parents bought back in the 90s. They moved to Seattle a couple of years ago, and I've been here ever since, taking care of the place and covering all the household expenses myself. Fast forward to now, it's been 7 months since Marlon and Paige split. He's still living with me, and we're still friends, but I make sure he contributes to groceries and the water bill since he's here full-time. A couple of nights ago, I was curled up in the living room watching Netflix when he suddenly asked me if I'd ever consider going on an actual date with him. Back in college, we'd tossed the idea around a few times, because when his family isn't in the picture, he really is a good guy, supportive, easy to be around, and fun. But we never took it further back then. I paused the show and told him we needed to have a real conversation. I admitted that if it were just him, without all the family baggage, I'd be open to dating him. But right now, almost all his money goes to his parents and brother. I reminded him of what happened with Paige and asked some hard questions. If we dated, got married, and had kids, how would he support our family while still bankrolling his? Would he actually set boundaries with them this time? And would his parents expect me to chip in for them too? I also pointed out something else. My mom is white, my dad is Indian and Catholic, though not very religious, and I'm mixed race. That could be a problem for his parents, given how judgmental they are and how little I share their values. Marlon said he'd try his best to balance things and would only ask me to help his parents occasionally, just to keep the peace. Then he added that they wouldn't mind me not being white as long as I agreed to follow their rules whenever they were around. I took a deep breath, told him flat out that unless he completely cut ties with his parents, I wouldn't date him, and that any future relationship he tried to have would fail for the same reason. After that, I went to bed, and we haven't brought up dating or his family since. For the record, I never seriously intended to date him anyway. We talked again yesterday and agreed that it wouldn't work, not just because of the family drama, but because he admitted his mom already said she wouldn't approve since I'm too brown. Honestly, one of the rare times racism has worked in my favor. He's also still hung up on Paige and has been hinting that he might try to win her back. I told him to leave her alone and that until he gets serious help and cuts his parents out of his life, starting another relationship would be a disaster. And yes, before you ask, we do have a written month-to-month lease. He pays me rent, though it's much less than what other places in the area go for, and if I ended it, I'd have to give him 30 days notice. A few of our mutual friends and I have been encouraging him to find his own place, hoping that maybe learning to stand on his own will give him the confidence to finally break away from his family. Update, May 26, 2025. Here's where things stand now, and honestly, it's gotten even messier. I guess I should rewind a bit. After Paige broke up with Marlon last October, she and I actually started talking more. We've become friends and even go to the gym together. Recently, she started dating a guy from the gym. I'll call him Virgil, 33. Turns out they went to the same high school, though they were a few years apart. Meanwhile, Marlon's been falling apart without her, all while continuing to drain himself financially for his family. His mom and brother still belittle him constantly, telling him he doesn't earn enough. He's told me more than once how much he misses having Paige there to comfort and support him whenever his family tears him down. No matter how many times I or our friends tell him to move on, he keeps insisting he wants to talk to her. Over the past 7 months, he's shown up at her house and her shop trying to have a conversation, but she shut him down every time. Eventually, she told him outright that if he came by uninvited again, she'd call the police and get a restraining order. That's when he finally stopped, at least for a while. On top of that, his mom has been hounding him about wanting grandchildren, and the pressure just never stops. Honestly, at this point, I'm convinced that part of the reason he wants Paige back, or maybe even considered me, is because he needs someone else to help shoulder the burden of supporting his family and to act as a buffer between him and them. In late March, Marlon found out Paige was dating Virgil, and he spiraled. He ranted about how he couldn't lose her, and I reminded him that she'd already ended things, they were done. But even then, he started calling, texting, and messaging her non-stop, even making new accounts when she blocked him. He keeps saying he just wants to talk and that he believes they can work things out. I told him, once again, to stop contacting her. I even showed Marlon a video message Paige had sent me specifically for him, where she flat out told him to stop contacting her. Fast forward to Saturday, May 17th. I'd taken some time off work to go on a week-long getaway with a guy I met online. I'll call him Jack, 55. He invited me to his cabin up in the mountains, and I figured I could use the break. While we were there, my phone buzzed with a doorbell notification. On the screen were Marlon's parents, standing at my front door. I'm guessing Marlon wasn't home because he never answered. Speaking through the doorbell camera, I told them he was probably at work and asked what they wanted. That's when they launched into this long rant about how disappointed they were in him for not earning enough to provide for them. They said they needed more money for his mom's legal bills, her gambling problem, and her medical expenses. Then his dad casually added that he wanted Marlon to sign for and pay for a Denali pickup truck because the last truck he bought had been repossessed. Out of nowhere, his mom asked if I was dating or sleeping with Marlon. I told her no, nothing like that was happening, and reminded her that Marlon himself had told me she didn't want me with him because, in her words, I was too brown. I said, so that shouldn't be a problem for you anyway. Her response? She said that at this point, because of her age and poor health, she just wanted grandkids even if they were mixed race. I was stunned. I told her I was only Marlon's friend and, legally, his landlord. That's it. Then she took it a step further and said that if Marlon and I ever did sleep together and I got pregnant, she wanted to name the baby. After that, they finally left, leaving me speechless and honestly feeling a little sick. I turned my phone off for most of the trip to save battery and avoid distractions, so I didn't see any notifications until Friday afternoon when Jack and I were packing up to leave. Once I turned it back on, I saw a flood of missed calls and messages from both Marlon and our friend Tiffany, 30. Jack dropped me off at home, and as soon as I walked in, I saw the mess. Marlon's room had been completely trashed, the living room was a wreck too, though not as bad, and he was sitting on the couch looking more miserable than I'd ever seen him. When I asked what happened, he said his parents had come by again while I was gone. He'd let them in, and they immediately started berating him for not giving them more money for debts, medical bills, and whatever else they wanted. It ended with him agreeing to take out a loan for them and going to a dealership with his dad to co-sign on the truck his dad wanted. By the time he got home, he was so frustrated he started smashing up his room and some of the living room furniture. I called Tiffany and asked her to come over. She and I sat with Marlon, trying to comfort him but also telling him, yet again, that he needed to cut off his parents. Tiffany reminded him that before his parents moved here, he was happy, confident, successful at work, and in a stable relationship with Paige. Now, he was just a shell of himself. I told him about the bizarre doorbell conversation I'd had with his mom and how his family's behavior was starting to affect me directly. He apologized and said he'd try to take care of it. Tiffany, who comes from a wealthy family, even offered to pay for him to go to therapy. But he turned her down, insisting that he just needed to try something else to win his parents over, still clinging to the idea that they were just misunderstood. I wanted to tell him that his family clearly had no boundaries, no self-control, and no basic decency, but at that point, it felt pointless. Tiffany and I cleaned up the living room while Marlon worked on his own room. Later that night, I called Tiffany and Paige to figure out what we could do. Paige suggested reaching out to other relatives who might be willing to support him. As for me, I'm leaning toward evicting Marlon from my family home, but I don't want to do it until we find somewhere else for him to stay. If anything major changes, I'll post an update.